Hey guys, welcome back. Well, I thought I'd follow up with a final video of the imaging that I was doing with the GT81 and the flat GT from William Optics, and also review some galaxy processing. And in the process of doing the processing, I started thinking about a weird question, which, hey, what if we lived in M81 and we're taking pictures of M82? What would that look like? Get to that in a minute. But first, we'll go through some image processing, a little bit of the preliminaries that we have to go through. Then we'll just follow up with taking a look at some images as we do the final steps, and then the final images that we have, which you can see represented here. All in all, a pretty good haul. I have about 4 galaxies and 1 mineral moon. So let's get started. So in this video, I've been using my GT81, which I've had for a while, but I've now paired it with the flat GT, which allows me to make use of the full 478 millimeters of the GT81 rather than cutting it back with the reducer flattener that I had been using. Another thing I was experimenting with, you can see over here, some counterweights on the AM5N. More on that later. I don't think I'm going to have anything much to say about it this time around. Now, for the PixInsight review, the things that I actually wanted to demonstrate, you guys have done it. I just thought I'd put it down on paper again, is go through the process of adding HA to the red channel and HA to the luminance channel for a enhanced HA RGB image at the end, because some of these galaxies we're looking at have a lot of good HA in them, and you kind of want to capture that if you possibly can do that. Then we'll take a look at using the image container and the process containers within PixInsight to hopefully automate some of these long-running processes like blur exterminator, noise exterminator, star exterminator, etc. And then allows you to get away from the computer and not just have to babysit it there all the time. So they're very useful processes within PixInsight. So I wanted to demonstrate that. And finally, we'll just kind of do an overview of the workflow, and like I say, we'll demonstrate the first two bullet points, but then we'll just review the images in the last bit of the workflow just to see what the images look like. And then finally, there's that pesky question I'm wondering about, which is what does M82 look like from M81? A lot of crazy stuff going on. Snow in Texas, counterweights on an AM5. What this world coming to? Here's my imaging history for M81 and M82. We went over many days, in part because of weather. There's a gap here between January 2nd and January 11th. After that, the moon came in at full force. And at only 47 degrees, I was a bit reluctant to do any broadband imaging on this target, even though I was sorely missing some hours that are summarized up here in the top row here, missing some hours on red, green, and blue, and I wanted more. But as we all know with M82, if you have HA, it'll drink up every bit of HA you can give it. So I didn't mind too much by doing the imaging with a full moon and using the HA filter fairly close to the target because I knew M82 was going to drink it all up. Then with M31, this is the target I would start the night with, do 3 to 4 hours of imaging, wait until M81 and M82 got high enough, then I'd switch over to that target and finish up. During the full moon period, the moon was 89 degrees away, so that's a pretty good separation. And I didn't have any qualms about doing the broadband imaging under that situation. All that worked out. Data looked great. No problems there. Well, it was like drinking soda through a soda straw. It took many nights, but I did finally round up enough data to do a halfway decent job with these galaxies in my Portal 8 skies. And so let's go on to the workflow. Let me show you how we're going to break these images down. We've got 5 stacked images here with luminance, red, green, blue, and H alpha. So let's walk through the process of how we're going to take these stacked images into a final image. This is my galaxy processing methodology, at least this time. I changed this up quite a bit, but certain things I seem to do all the time just because it makes sense to me. As I say, we'll start off with the 5 images. We've got the luminance. I'm calling this the H alpha sub 0 here, 0 for the initial because we're going to modify that, get a pure HA signal. We've got red, green, and blue, of course. First thing I do right off the bat is gradient correction. You'll see in the demonstration I'll be using dynamic background extraction, but there are other tools out there now that many of you are aware of and are using that work just as well, and some of you would argue work even better. I find I have good luck with DBE. Anyway, we're going to start off with the continuum subtraction here by getting the true HA out of our initial HA stack here by subtracting off the red channel data that's in the HA or hydrogen alpha bandwidth. So that's the first step. And then we'll combine that HA with the red to get a HAR, hydrogen alpha red channel. And we'll also combine the HA to get an HA luminance channel. And after that, we'll create an RGB image. I'll ultimately only be using this for stars, and I'll only be combining the red, the green, and the blue. And then we'll do the also another RGB image where we'll take the HA red channel, combo channel here, and combine that with green and blue to get the HA RGB. And we'll use the spectrophotometric color calibration tool to properly calibrate the image from that point. Then we go through the process of blur exterminator and noise exterminator in that order for each of the 3 images that are coming out of this initial pre-processing step here. And this is the part that I'm actually going to demonstrate in PixInsight. But after that, we'll do the stretch. Lots of options here. There's generalized hyperbolic stretch, histogram transformation, arc sine stretch, various options here. But we'll go from the linear state here to the nonlinear state with those 3 images. Now for the HAL, I'm just going to be trying to boost up the contrast and the detail, and usual suspects here, the high dynamic range, multi-scale transform, and the local histogram equalization tool, and there are others you could possibly use. But here the main objective with this monochrome image is to simply bring out the contrast and bring out the detail. With the hydrogen RGB image and the pure RGB image, we'll be focusing on color, improving the colors and the saturation. Mostly this time around for me, I just did some saturation, and that's about it. And then we'll take the HARGB and combine it with the HA luminance using the LRGB combination tool, and then that will be a single image. Meanwhile, we'll have the RGB image over here, and all I'm going to do is go through a little step of star exterminator, pull out the stars from that image, set those aside, pull out the stars from this HALRGB image, and discard the stars in this case. And you might want to consider using a mask over your galaxy, because depending on the target, some of those nodules of hydrogen alpha can look like stars and get pulled out. So in my case, I'm using a pretty stark mask over the galaxy to prevent that from happening. So the stars that are up in the galaxy space are stars that started out in this HARGB image and were kept throughout, whereas the stars outside the galaxy are these stars that I'm going to then add into the black space around the galaxy or galaxies. And then we just blend the stars that we get from here into the HALRGB image for a final image. And then in this case, we're going to be just reviewing the image through here. I'm not going to demonstrate all the steps. The fact of the matter is there's no one right way to process images. I have managed to find quite a few wrong ways to do it, but I haven't found one right way to do it. There are some elements here that I tend to do all the time, and there are some others where I play around bit and experiment. But experiment is the order of the day when you're using PixInsight and doing image processing. And at the end of the day, it's actually a kind of a nice feature of the hobby in that you can take the data you work so hard to get and just go back and reprocess it and see what you get. Go back and reprocess it using a different technique, see what you get. And eventually you'll develop some skills that you'll be happy with and some skills that you won't be happy with. And that's about where I am right now. Let's go over to PixInsight and walk through this initial phase of pre-processing data up through the end of blur exterminator and noise exterminator. So I've got the 2 galaxies set up on 2 different workspaces. In this workspace, clearly I've got M81 and M82. And on the other workspace here, I've got M31. What I'm going to do is go through the steps of processing one of these galaxies and try to demonstrate that, but then just apply that without having to drag you through the details. Apply the exact same steps to the other one, and we'll just watch the progress on both as we go through this. Now, the way I typically work, as you can see here, I've got the luminance, stacked luminance image. I've got the red, green has a gradient, blues, and HA. The first thing I want to do is remove the gradient. Now, there are a lot of good gradient removal tools out there. I'm going to stick with just the DBE process. I've put in a lot of points here trying to avoid the galaxy and stars. And if you look closely, you can see that there are a couple of red samples up here. I'm going to just change that here to be 3.0 and then do a resize. Yes, and that recovered those points. So if you continue to use DBE, and some of you, or probably most of you, have switched over to just the gradient correction options that are out there, be sure and check that. And then I'm going to subtract out the background, whatever it comes up with. I do like to see what the background is, so I have it go ahead and produce that image. So let's just run this on this one and see what it looks like. And there we go. I'll kill that off. And this is what our corrected image looks like. We'll put it side by side with the original. And here's what the background looked like. So a nice even transition of the gradient from dark in this corner to light in that corner. And it doesn't look like a galaxy is in here, so that's good news. And if we just compare the two, I think you can see that there's been a rather remarkable improvement in the background. So it's clearly a much flatter frame now than it was. And I think dynamic ground extraction did a pretty good job. Okay, so from this point, I'm going to do this on all 10 images for all of the images for M81 and M82, and then go and repeat the same thing for the M31. Okay, so I finished that task. We can go through and look at the data. Here's M31 and the luminance. We have the red, looking for any residual gradients. I'm not seeing anything that I'm worried about. Green, we have blue, and we have HA. So everything looks pretty good from a gradient correction standpoint. And let's go over and take a look at M81 and M82. Here's our gradient corrected luminance image. We have the red and green, blue, and HA. Lots of HA here. Wanted to really plow through the HA for M82's sake, so hopefully that'll give us a good effect in the end. So now the next step is to do the continuum subtraction and just pull out the HA that we're actually going to make use of in the imaging going forward. And for that, I'm going to bring up the channel combination process. And so now I'm going to populate these, but not with the red, green, and blue. I'm going to start with HA in the red channel, be in any other channel. And then in the other two channels, I'm going to go ahead and put the red data in. Didn't take, there it is. And we'll also put that in this channel. And then we'll do a combination. Now this is a fake color image, but what we're ultimately going to do is to turn this into we're going to do a background neutralization on it. I'm going to bring up the screen transfer function and just unlink the channels. And now go find a nice piece of background, use it to neutralize the area here. So I'm going to create a preview, and now we'll bring up the background neutralization. Our reference is going to be the one with the preview that we just created, image 6 preview. And I'm going to leave all of that the same. Another option here, I could just say region of interest and drag and drop this into here. And we're good on that front. So either way is okay. And now we'll execute this. And we'll do a linked stretch this time. And it should kind of look the same as it just did. It does. And now you can see there's some red in here. All the red that you're seeing is the HA. Pull out the channels, the RGB, recognizing that the red channel is actually our HA. So I'm going to call this M81, for short, HA. And I'm going to call any one of these others as just the red channel, but it's the new red channel because the backgrounds have been normalized now with respect to each other. So I'm going to call this M81 red. And so now we have these two images. And what I'm going to do is subtract red from this image over here so that I'm taking out that portion of the red light that's in the HA bandwidth. And to do that, I'll bring up Pixel Math. And what we'll say is $T minus M81R. And I want to create a new image just so I can check what it is. So create a new image, and we should be able to just execute that by dragging this onto the HA. Now we've subtracted out the red. Let's see what that looks like. And you can see now when we zoom in, let's do the M81 and M82. Bring up the same image over here. It's pretty much just the intense HA that we have left, but we do have some stars. I'll just accept this as the HA from now on, and we'll work with that. This HA we don't need anymore. I'm going to call this the new HA. Now what we need to do is to add the HA to the red to create an HR combined HR red image. And I'm going to do that with this script here. Now, if you look at this, I've got it set up so that there's a scale factor here that we multiply times the HA that we're going to add to the red. But I've also got a version of it for linear images when I'm combining in the linear state, which is what I'm doing now. I also have a nonlinear version where instead I would be doing a blending operation instead of a simple addition operation. This will keep things from saturating. So it's a better way to add data together when you're in the nonlinear state. We're in the linear state, so I'm going to do this. I'm also going to do a lot of the HA, about 0.9 of what we have here. So that 0.9 is going to get multiplied times the HA that we have times the scale factor, and then that's going to be added to the target image. And so I'm going to bring up the red. That's going to be my target image. I'm also going to bring up HA for a minute, and I have it HA here, so I could change this to new HA, or I could just temporarily change the name here to HA. And that way the image name will match what is shown there. And if I do the copy and drag the triangle on, it's going to create a new image that has the red and the HA combined. So we'll bring that over here. So this is the original red. This is the red with the HA. So let's just zoom in and see what it looks like. So this is our original red with the two galaxies. And now we have this. So you can see a lot of the HA has been added in here. The HA is over here in M82. So we're capturing a lot of that. Now, when we add this in with the blue and the green, we'll have an HA RGB image. And I'm also going to create just a pure RGB image using this red in order to get the stars, and I'll put the stars out for later and adding those back in. So let's go ahead at this stage and combine these into a color image. Do channel combination again. And I'm going to iconize everything here. So that's our red, green, and our blue. We also have this, which is the HAR. And I want to save this off. So this is going to be M81 underscore HAR. And we'll save that. But let's go ahead and create this image. First, the RGB image where we just have the red, the green, and the blue. And we'll do the global on that. And that will be a color image, though it won't be colors we're looking for. And we'll bring up the script for image analysis. And I think this has changed in version 1.9. I'm still using 1.8, as I said. Okay, and now let's bring up photometric color calibration. And I'm using the Antlia filters, so I need to change that. We've established our background again, and I can simply drag that over. And we'll link those and then try it again. And so this is supposedly our red, green, and our RGB image. There's an add bit of blue in there. Obviously, we don't have the HA here, so there's only a little bit of that red that's coming out there. That's our RGB image for M81 and M82. And now we need to repeat this process for the HA RGB image. And all I'm going to do here is replace that line with this one. And we'll do the channel combination. And there's our astrometric solution. And now I can bring up spectrophotometric color calibration. We still have the region of interest. It's the same region of interest set, so I'm just going to keep that and drag and drop that onto this image. Let's park that and that. And now let's look at our HA in this image. Looks pretty good. So quite a bit of difference here. I hope this, I want to keep and emphasize this as we go through the processing, but that's a pretty good delta in this image here. Likewise, if we go over to M81, we can see that we have nothing really showing up here, and bring that over, and we have quite a bit of HA in M81 as well. And now we have the two RGB images here and here. And the last thing I want to do before I go back over to M31 is add the HA to the luminance. Now I put in 0.9 of this image over here into the red. I'm going to put 0.3 of this image into the luminance. And so we'll go back to here. I'm going to cut this down to 0.3. And we can compare what we have here. There's our two galaxies with no HA. And here is the same with the HA. So now you can see we're getting a bit more of this luminance for the HA that will pair up with the red that we see in our HA RGB image. And now we don't need the luminance image anymore, so we can close that down. We have the HA luminance combination here, so I'm going to keep that. And now that's all we need to go forward with this particular galaxy. Now, I'm going to go head over and do the same thing with M31. Okay, so now we're at the stage where we need to do some very time-consuming adjustments to the 6 images, the 3 for M81 and M82 and the 3 for M31. I'm going to do a blur exterminator run on each of the 3 images, and then I'm going to do a noise exterminator run on each of the 3 images. And I think in order to do this, so that I'm not tied down to the computer, I'm going to use the ImageContainer and ProcessContainers to have it just run this in kind of a batch mode so that I can go on a, I don't know, 3-week vacation while it tries to do all the calculations here. Anyway, let's set up the ImageContainer first. I'm going to right click on the background here, find ImageContainer, and I'm just going to go in and select the files that I want to put in here. It'll be, all these files are saved onto the disk, so I'm going to go ahead and just pick those files from each of the folders for this galaxy pair and for M31, and let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so here we have all of the files selected. There's 6 of them. I don't know that I need a base directory, but I'll go ahead and select one. Probably just put it into the root directory here for M31. Select that folder. The output directory also, we'll just make it this folder. And then I'm going to change the extension here to be BNX for Blur Noise Exterminator. And that should be good to go for the image container. I'll drag and drop the instance off onto the desktop. So I need to go find ProcessContainer, and it's over here somewhere. Then I'll bring in the blur exterminator. I'll do that first. I'm going to reset this to standard parameters, and I'm going to hold that into here for blur exterminator. Minimize that, get it out of the way, and go get noise exterminator. And once again, I'll just use the default parameters for that as well. And there we go. And now I'll drag and drop a process icon off over here. Now it's just a matter of dragging and dropping the process container onto the image container. And now I've got a lot of spare time on my hands. So I'll check back with you in a bit after all of this is done. So we're now at the end of that demonstration part. So we'll go back into PixInsight and just march through these images as they go through their various processing steps until we end up with the final image. starting with M81 and M82, this is what I currently have as my HA RGB data. You can see we don't have the little green tag here, so it is a stretched image at this point, and we still have the stars involved. One of the first things that we'll do, though, is bring up the corresponding image in the HA luminance channel or data, and then we'll combine those into the combined HA LRGB image using LRGB combination. Again, we still have the stars from the original images that made up this particular image here. Then we're going to pull out those stars, and in this case, I did use a mask to protect the HA because you can see here it would be very easy for one of the star extraction processes that we rely on to recognize those as stars and pull them out, and then you just wasted all that time putting them in. So yeah, I did put a mask over these galaxies, and so this is what I have now, and you can see that all of the stars, all of the HA regions survived, but so did the stars that happen to be within my mask boundary. C'est la vie. That's just the way it goes. And then we have the stars from the RGB image, the pure RGB image. This image is not stretched as much as I stretched the HA RGB image. So I've kept the stars a bit small, probably used a bit more saturation on these stars than I used in the processing of the galaxies. But this is why I end up with a star field, and then we can combine or blend the star field in with the galaxy image, and this is what I get for a final image. And you can see I probably did some cropping around to get rid of some artifacts around the edges here, but that's our basic image. We'll take a closer look at this a little bit later, but you can see that all that time I spent getting some HA did pay off a bit. There is some good HA in there, and it does that galaxy justice. The HA over here is a tad bit maybe irritating, but that's one of the choices you get to make when you're deciding how much HA to put into a target when you're combining it with the red channel. Anyway, that's the final image, at least my first version of a final image for the M81, M82 pair, and this little guy up here. We'll go back and look at that in a bit. Let's go over to M31 and see what we have. Now we have the same situation here. We have our RGB HA RGB image, lots of good HA in this galaxy as well. This is just the HA RGB image. We then have the luminance image that we bring up. We have HA included in this as well. As you can see here, so you can see all this is kind of the luminance that we threw into this image, into the luminance. Then we combine the two using the LRGB combination. So this should have a bit more contrast, and you can see that it does. You can look at this dust lanes here. They're quite a bit stronger here because we've taken the HA that we have worked on the contrast and HA and luminance, and then combined it with the RGB or HA RGB image over here. Pull out the stars, and once again, the HA and any stars within this boundary are going to be the stars that were actually there in the images. And then finally, we have the stars, again, not stretched as much as I would have stretched these images for the galaxies. But you can see this void here. That's where the mask was that prevented us from pulling out any HA or stars in this part of the image. Now we blend them together, and this becomes our final image. I have rotated it. I don't know why, but we seem to have a preference for looking at M31 like this. The dust lanes here are closest to us. That's why we can't see the dust lanes as clearly over there because there's intervening dust. But whether you rotate this picture 180 degrees or rotate it like this, as shown here, it really just comes down to whether you envision yourself flying towards this galaxy from above, as I'm showing here, or from below, as it would be if it were rotated 180 degrees. All in all, I'm pretty happy with this image. I always feel like I can do better going back to it. We'll take a closer look later, but there is some good structure, good detail here in the core, which is sometimes hard to pull out because the core is very bright with M31. Okay, let's go back over and do some astro math now and figure out what would it look like if you were living here and were looking at this and trying to take a picture of M82. All right, so let's say you're an astrophotographer in M81 and you want to take a picture of your nearest galaxy neighbor, just like we like to take a picture of M31. Now, of course, when we take a picture of M31, we think, wow, that galaxy's huge, but I can't see anything. I wonder what it would be like if you lived in M81 and were trying to take a picture of M82. So the first thing we want to do is figure out what is the distance between these two galaxies. Now, the distance from us here on Earth to these two galaxies is about 12 million light years each. One of them is sometimes reported to be 11.8 million light years, and another one could be 12.07, plus or minus 100,000 light years, give or take. And kind of a little variable there, and it does affect the math we're going to do, but I'm just going to make things simple on us today and go with the 12 million light years distant. That isn't always the case when we look at the nighttime sky. It might appear that two galaxies are close together when in fact one is very close and one is very far away. This just happens to be one of those unique instances where the two galaxies in the field of view are actually very close together. Now, once you get the coordinates from PixInsight, you can just, in PixInsight, you can hover over some point in an image and pull out the pixel coordinates here, and that's what you see here. Use this to calculate the number of pixels between here and here. And it turns out for my imaging terrain, we've got 1 arc second per pixel. So this is the number of pixels. It's also the number of arc seconds. And so that comes out to be about a half a degree of arc as we see it from here on Earth, which is coincidentally about the same arc width and arc view that we have of our own moon. So this is a very familiar distance that we're looking at here. Now the thing is, we need to figure out what is the actual physical distance, linear distance between where we live and are taking a picture of M82, where it is relative to us in M81. Won't bore you too much with the math, although I don't mind boring you occasionally with math. We'll take that 0.53 degrees in here and the 12 million light years here, go through the triangle calculation process, and we come out with about 0.11, or in other words, another million light years, or in other words, 110,000 light years from here to here. By comparison, M31 is 2.58 million light years from us. This is very close to you if you were living in M81. The next thing we want to do is play the same game in terms of figuring out how big M82 is. We'll go somewhere out here in this fuzzy area and somewhere out here in this fuzzy area and pull off the coordinates from PixInsight. Again, 1 arc second per pixel, so 544 pixels equals 544 arc seconds, and then using the distance from us to convert this into a distance, linear distance, we get 0.032 million light years, or 32,000 light years. Now, what we want to know is what is the field of view that we would have and have to accommodate using our telescope if we were living back here and wanted to take that picture? Well, it's about 16 degrees. That is a lot. Andromeda is about 3 degrees of arc for us. Of course, the moon is about half a degree of arc. So this is quite a bit larger than what we're used to. And if you go through the calculations, you'll find that if you live here and you have an ASI 294, don't know how you got it, but if you had those tools, you'd have to find a telescope or maybe just a camera or maybe just an iPhone with a 65 millimeter focal length, because that's how small the focal length needs to be for you to fit this target into field of view of your sensor. Now, what does it actually look like? Well, if we are here on Earth, we know that the moon is about a half a degree of arc. And yeah, it's one of the most noticeable things in the sky when it's there, of course. But then we have Andromeda. We can't see it, but we know that it's 6 times longer in the length dimension than the moon has in diameter. So a fairly impressive sight if we could only see it. Now, let's step over this meridian line, except this time the meridian line is a division between Earth 1 here in the Milky Way and Earth 2 and M81. And this is what we would see if we could see it for M82. This thing would be huge. It would be a very impressive picture. I hope folks there get to see it, and it's not like Andromeda is for us. And we know it is there. We know it's big. We know it takes up a good bit of the sky. You can't see it. Well, here, hopefully, the relative proximity of this galaxy to M81 and its huge size would present a pretty nice nighttime show if you were taking a picture of this guy with a telescope with a small enough focal length. All right, just to go back over what we did, I wanted to demonstrate once again the continuum subtraction process as I used it on these two galaxies. It allows you to dial in the amount of HA you want and in a fairly systematic and accurate way. I do it in the linear state. I know some people like to do the combination in the nonlinear state. I don't know. For me, I've always found that the linear state works a little bit better. I also put in whatever I put in on the RGB side, I put 1/3 of the HA into the luminance image. Also demonstrated the use of ImageContainer and ProcessContainer as a way of automating and batch jobbing some of these long running processes like Blur Exterminator and Noise Exterminator. It's nice to be able to just set, in my case, a set of 6 images and let them go. 6 images because I had 3 from the M82, M81 image set and 3 from the M31 image set, and just let those things go and come back later and without having to be nailed to the computer to set off the next analysis. So those are very useful and probably not that frequently used features of PixInsight. I've been using the AM5 with and without counterweights. Seeing has been highly variable with the state of the weather that we have here, so it's very difficult to extract out what is the benefit or not of counterweights compared to no counterweights. My impression is that there was not a great improvement with the counterweights. Finally, M31 is close to us, but it's only 2.6 million light years from us, giving us a 3 degrees of visual arc. But M82 is a much more impressive target for folks in M81, given that it's only 110,000 light years away and may cover up to 16 degrees of arc, depending on how far each of those galaxies actually is from us. Proximity of the M82 to M81 is what's driving this aggressive star formation within M82, which in turn produces stars that give off significant radiation, which in turn lights up the hydrogen that's in and around M82. So that's why we see that one feature that stands out to us most, the hydrogen alpha in M82. It's because of this galaxy's very close proximity to M81 and the effect of M81's gravity on the gas clouds in M82. Well, that's 4 galaxies, a mineral moon, and I've been using the GT81 at 478 millimeters and the AM5N, and all is well. Now the fun is over, and it's time for real galaxy season and back to the drudgery of using the SCT. Clear skies, everyone. Take care.